Coming up on today's show.
But in the last 15, 20 years, with a shift in the economy and in business, there is so much work. Most of us are doing the work of 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4 people.
How do you, first of all, identify if someone's having a prioritization issue, and then how are we going to deal with it?
So what I've done is created a little 4-category process that's very simple, but it helps. It's simple enough. I think if it's too complex, a lot of these systems we have out are so complex. If it's too complex, it's not manageable.
If everything's important, nothing is important. We'll find out why today on Keeping You Organized. Hello and welcome to Keeping You Organized. Today we're going to talk about prioritization, and joining us is Ellen Fay from ellenfay.com. And Ellen, where are you located?
I live in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is a suburb of Philadelphia, John.
Awesome. And you are a certified professional organizer and been in business since 2001. But we want to talk a little bit about prioritization today, and our teaser line, which was, if everything's important, then nothing's important. Let's kind of unpack that a little bit and find out why.
Sounds good, John. So basically, we have so much going on. No one can do everything that they need to get done. There's all this opportunity coming at us, all this information coming at us, the little minutia, the big important things. And when I first started out in business a number of years ago, we could actually get it done. But in the last 15, 20 years, with a shift in the economy and in business, there is so much work. Most of us are doing the work of 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4 people that you can't get it all done.
Well, that was like when the computers were invented. Everyone thought, well, our life's going to be easier now, right? But except they just gave us more work to do.
It's right. It like doubled and tripled what we have to do.
Right. Well, let's say you're meeting with a client for the first time, and how do you first of all identify if someone's having a prioritization issue, and then how are we going to deal with it?
Well, I quite haven't met a client that isn't having a prioritization issue. I think we all have it, no matter if we're super organized or we're feeling a little bit out of control. So I think that's pretty consistent through everyone I run into these days, professionally and personally. But when I'm with a client, what I'm going to do to help them focus in on their priorities is we have to back up and we have to work on figuring out what's most important. And sometimes they have goals and sometimes they don't, but I like to go through a goal setting exercise with them first thing so we can get clear about what's important. If they know what their goals are, then it helps them to choose the best priorities to help reach the goal. So sometimes I tell them, pick some life areas, but they can pretty well know what their goals are. So that's our first step.
Okay. Well, what about the person who, I think about this myself sometimes. I have 10 A1s. Everything's important. The school is important. Home such and such is important. How can you help someone just nudge away a little bit and take all the importance and at least try to prioritize those, I guess?
So what I've done is created a little 4-category process that's very simple, but it helps. It's simple enough. I think if it's too complex, a lot of these systems we have out are so complex. If it's too complex, it's not manageable. But I just break it down into 4 categories. I call it critical, hot, sooner, or later. So basically, critical things have to be done today or you can't go to bed. Okay. Or you can't go home or whatever it is. So these have to be done today. And we know that if I don't do this, then I'm in trouble. There's something I have to do before I go to bed. Then the hot things are things that if I don't do in the next maybe 2 or 3 days or 4 days, there's going to be a consequence. Maybe you'll miss an opportunity or it'll cost you more money. Or I like to say you'll be terribly embarrassed because sometimes we just have to do things so, we fulfill our responsibilities. Or, also if it's important to you and it's of value to you to get that specific thing done, then that could be a hot. then I say to my clients, everything else is going to be done sooner or later. And it is. So if we say these are critical, we have to do those today. Here's the hot things, and there's a consequence if we don't do them. That everything else we just push aside and we say these are sooner and these are later. That helps us see these are the critical things. This is what I have to do today. And the rest of them I push aside and I don't even think about. So I might tell them, put them on its own Post-it or put it on a special critical list for today. And let's not really worry about anything, but now we know where we have to focus for today.
Now, do you think it's important when you first start this process to do kind of a mind dump of, everything you can possibly think of that is important or even not important so that you can kind of gather it all together and go through that procedure?
Absolutely. So if we could get the most things done and most things documented into a priority system, then it helps them feel like there's no, what I say, well, how many scary monsters are hiding on your desk? And if we could get rid of those scary monsters, that helps them feel better as they go to work on their tasks. So there's different methods we could do it. Sometimes I'll take a letter pad and draw it into 4 quadrants, and I'll break out the critical, hot, sooner or later into that. Sometimes I'll make 4 piles with them. Sometimes we'll put it into a computer system for them. My favorite is a whiteboard because we can see it and it doesn't get lost and it doesn't get buried under a piece of paper or it doesn't go to a different screen. But it's not as important how we do it, what tool we use to do it is that we do it because everyone has different preferences in the tools that they use.
Well, now what comes to my mind is thinking about someone who maybe has a lot of physical mess, clutter and things like that, but also has this going on too. Are you a proponent of trying to maybe before you even tackle the physical mess that you get, the projects or the ideas or the to-dos and all that kind of thing under control first, or are these two totally separate projects?
They're so completely related, John. I'm so glad you asked, because what happens is as we go through some of the contents on the desk, that facilitates the tasks that get written up on the priority list, or if I'm using a whiteboard on the board, because as we're looking at a paper, then they're saying, oh, I have to do this. And I really try to work with them to make the paper go away, to either scan it or file it or put it in an Evernote or recycle it or move it on to someone else. But if we could capture the tasks, because like sometimes I'll have a big piece of paper that says call Mary at this phone number. Well, if we write on the board, call Mary in that phone number, and that's now on your critical or hot list or sooner or later, then the paper goes away and we're starting to process the contents of the desk and set your priorities at the same time.
Now, have you ever had anybody hire you to do this process and then when you're meeting with them, you kind of look around and say, you know what, they need more than this. They do need the physical clutter and all that, and maybe they didn't admit that or think about that?
Sure. People all have different motives of calling me or calling a professional organizer or productivity coach. And at the end of the day, it's all productivity and organization is pretty well interrelated. Getting organized is what we do to become more productive.
Okay.
So they don't really know when they call how to separate and pull it apart. That's what they look to me to help them do. But we start on whatever is disturbing enough that motivated them to pick up the phone or send me an email to call me. And we start by that, but we create a whole system so that they are able to really create this on their own in the future and stay on top of their stuff.
Okay. Well, great. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about, now that we've got everything put in the different buckets or different lists or organized by critical or hot or whatever, then I want to find out, how do we start approaching it on a day-to-day basis? How do we implement it? So we'll talk about that when we come back. We're with Ellen Fay from ellenfay.com talking about prioritization, and we'll be right back. Never lose your stuff again. Introducing the new Stick and Find personal tracking device from Smead. Stick and Find trackers use Bluetooth technology to help you locate your keys, electronics, pets, kids, and more. Using the free Stick and Find radar app and your smartphone, you can locate your stuff up to 150 feet away at the touch of a button. Stick and Find works with many popular iOS smartphones, tablets, and select Android devices. For more information, contact your local office supplies reseller. Never lose your stuff again. The Stick and Find Bluetooth Location Tracker from Smead, keeping you organized. We are back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about prioritization, and we're joined by Ellen Fay from ellenfay.com. And before the break, we kind of did the mind dump, got everything down, put it in little categories or buckets. I don't know what you call them, but we've got your critical, the hot, and then the things to do someday or later. That's great. We've got it down. You're probably feeling better about that as a person. So now how do we decide to move forward? What's your system, or how do you help clients do that?
Well, I suggest to them that we build into their work week a weekly focus session.
Okay.
And the technique is pretty basic. We take, and some of my clients, I come and I do that with them every maybe 2 or 3 weeks on a regular basis because they like that support. Others, I teach them the skill, and then they just continue on after we're done with our work together. But basically, we take all the little Post-it notes and all the piles, and we put it in one big pile. And then we take a piece of paper at a time, and it's really important to only do one thing at a time because our brains can only process one piece of information at a time. And if you're sitting there with 16 pieces of paper in your hand, that's overwhelming. So one item at a time, and we look at it and we say, where do we put it into our system? And at the beginning, we have a pile this high, and at the end, it is now prioritized in terms of critical or hot or sooner or later, and or put in a system or put in a follow-up file or a folder or recycled. So you have to stay on top of this on a weekly or bi-weekly basis if it's really going to serve you.
Okay, how about when you add something new? So we've done this, and a couple days later, here comes another project. And how do you process incoming?
So you just say, I like to break it down into what are the steps of it, but what is, it's the David Allen, what is my next action that I have to do? And that goes on the list. And it could be that the overarching project stays on, maybe under hot, but a specific aspect of that project gets pulled out and put on the critical list for today.
Okay. Well, now let's get to the calendar part of this, because you said put it into your schedule.
Yeah.
What kinds of calendars or schedules are you setting up with people? Are they paper calendars, electronic? I mean, how do you structure within your calendar?
Again, it doesn't matter as much the tool as it does that we do it. I would say with my clients, it's a 50-50 split between a paper calendar and an electronic calendar. But what's really important is that we schedule that, and I recommend a 2-hour block to get started. And after you get caught up, it could go down to an hour and then even a little quicker, but an hour a week. So let's say we start with your 2-hour block. And some people like to do it maybe from 3 to 5 on a Friday afternoon so that they could go into their weekend clear, knowing exactly how much pressure they're under and what has to be done. That's my preference, is my Friday afternoon. Other people like to do it on Saturday morning when the phone isn't ringing. And others like to do it maybe on a Monday morning so they're freshly started for the week. So you put that on your calendar. So it's on my calendar from 3 to 5. It doesn't mean it's set in stone that it has to be there from 3 to 5. So if I have something important I have to do from 3 to 5, what is important is that instead of having it drop off my calendar, I move it to another place, that I am committed to spending my 2 hours every week focusing in on prioritizing my work so I can do during my work hours the most important work that is going to help me fulfill my goals.
Well, I ask this question a lot. What do you use, paper or digital? What's your personal system?
My personal system is Google Calendar all the way. I share it with my family. I have some of my volunteering appointments are shared there. Um, I have it on my iPad. I have it on my iPhone. I have it on my computer. It's with me all the time. I color code so everything jumps out at me. I know where my clients are. I know where my business development is. I know what's personal. And if I see my colors are all focused too much, then I know my week's kind of out of balance and I'm not going to be as happy. So I use my colors in my calendar a lot to help me have a good balance in my work life, in my life.
Well, how many colors do you use, and kind of what do they represent?
I use maybe 10 colors. Do you
Okay.
want to see, John?
Sure, why not?
Let's pull my iPad,
Let's see if this works live via Skype or not. But
see what we can do here. I'm pretty brave doing this.
yes, folks, don't try this at home. Doing this live is one of those things that we have to be careful with. But
Okay. So here's this week.
you have to move it up a little bit
Oops.
closer, and apologize to the people who are just listening. But we'll try to do a commentary on it too. We're getting a little bit of glare there, but anyway. So you see the different. Why don't you just describe it there so that people listening can also
So
get this?
my clients are teal.
Okay.
My personal are blue. My business development is purple. Volunteering is pink. And then I have plenty of other colors for each kid gets a color. My husband, he gets a color. If it's a family event, that gets a color. So I could pretty well at a glance see where my spaces are. And, sometimes I'll put something on my calendar and I'll have to move it around. But I could see, I know where a client is. So I'm not going to move a client.
Now, are you a proponent of taking and filling your whole day, or do you just say, hey, everything I've scheduled I'm going to do, and then everything is rest is free time? Or how do you deal with your open holes?
I always have plenty of work for my open holes. So I have over here on my wall my critical hot sooner or later list, and I'm always I do a lot. Almost everything is electronic.
Okay.
But I love my lists, my priority lists, as I call them, manual, so I could always see them no matter what. So I could always look there. There's always emails. There's always phone calls. So if I do have an hour opening, that's long enough to do deep work, but maybe if it's only 15 or 20 minutes, I'm not going to get into a big project because by the time I ramp up, I've got to stop. So that's not productive. So I'll just zero in and see what can I do in the 15 minutes I have.
Well, let's talk about some productivity hacks, little secrets or tips or things that maybe you do. I mean, one that comes to mind, you hear a lot of people say, if you don't want to forget to take something, you put it in front of the door. I mean, that's just an example. But what are some other little things, or maybe apps or electronic things that you use to help you be more productive?
Well, I put all the information about a particular appointment into my notes on my Google Calendar. And the Google Calendar and the iCalendar and a lot of the calendars you can do through apps, they're all very, very similar. But they all have a notes section. So let's say I have a flight. I'm going to put my confirmation number and what time the plane leaves in the notes section, but I'm going to block myself to be at the airport an hour and a half early, so I know exactly what's there, and all of that information I can count on is always going to be in my calendar. Or if I have a client note that I need to follow up with something specifically about with a client, I'm going to put the client's name like John, and I'll put a -N next to it. So when I see that on my calendar, there's an N, that's my cue to look at the notes on that calendar event. Great. And I will read that ahead of time and know what it is to follow up with a client. Or I'll do a -T if it's a tentative event. I learned this from a client who always did her tentatives in pencil. I said, well, how do I do pencil on an electronic calendar? So I put a -T, and then I know my time is tentative, and I could follow up with it to be sure it's set as a date gets closer. Because sometimes, let's say you have plans to go to dinner with someone or have a coffee or meeting, and you say, okay, we're going to meet for coffee Wednesday afternoon, and I just block it in my calendar for 3 o'clock. Well, unless it's for sure, I'm going to show up at 3 o'clock, and if it's still tentative, how do I know? So that -T is my little hack for cueing me that I better confirm the time.
Well, those are incredible ideas. We're just about out of town. We're just about out of time, not out of town, but we're out of time. And I want to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about the services you offer. Is it just local? Do you do virtual? And how people can get a hold of you if you could provide your website.
Sure. Well, my website, John, thank you, is ellenfay.com, www.ellenf as in Frank, AYE.com. I do hands-on organizing in the Philadelphia region and business productivity coaching, and it kind of sometimes turns into business consulting. I am a certified organizer coach. I do a lot of our coaching sessions with people all over the country, and we do a lot of this productivity coaching. Love to do that kind of work. I have a background in business and hotel management, so my business background comes in, and with my organizing experience and my coaching certification and my business experience, it's kind of morphed my business into doing productivity and business consulting, and it's really a wonderful joy for me to help people reach their goals and live their dreams because of the work we do together.
Well, and like you say, everyone feels better when they're productive. So I even feel better after doing this episode. I think we've accomplished a lot.
Awesome, John. Well,
Great.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed being with you.
Awesome. Productivity, it's Ellen Fay from ellenfay.com today on Keeping You Organized. Coming up next time on Keeping You Organized.
We are here. This is a live Q&A. We are going to answer your organizing questions. Now, whether it's home organizing or organizing for the office, we have 3 of the top professional organizers. And so we're going to get right into it right away.